They didn't tow my truck, they didn't slash my tires, they didn't even send a nasty letter. They did something way crazier than that. While I was out of town helping my sister get to the bathroom after surgery, somebody took a bulldozer to the only road to my house and just erased it. Like my entire life at the end of that gravel line was a typo they could delete. I live on 10 acres in Tennessee, way out where you can still hear a screen door slam from a quarter-mile away and nobody's in a hurry unless a cow's loose. My place sits at the very end of a gravel road that's been there longer than I've been alive, a little over half a mile from County Route 18 straight back to my front gate. It cuts through rolling pasture, old cedar fence lines, and the kind of red clay that stains your boots like a permanent reminder you don't live in a neighborhood, you live on land. That road was laid down in 1964, back when this part of the county was more cattle than cul-de-sacs. It's not pretty. No pavement, no streetlights, no fancy markers, just packed gravel over red clay, a strip of common sense that says, people live back here. And the important part, the part that matters in a world where men in clean shoes love paperwork, is that there's a recorded easement on it. Filed with the county. Permanent. Not a handshake, not a favor, not a sure you can pass through if you're nice to me. It guarantees I can get to my house without asking anyone's permission. When you live rural like this, access isn't convenience. It's survival. Groceries come down that road. UPS trucks bounce down that road. My sister drove down that road the day we buried our dad. EMTs would come down that road if I ever needed them. You mess with access out here, you're not just being annoying, you're putting somebody in a corner. For years, the land between my property and Route 18 belonged to an old farmer named Delmare. Quiet man. Tough hands. He leased the fields for soybeans and mostly kept to himself. One time, leaning on his truck, he told me, "As long as I'm breathing, nobody's building condos out here." I remember smiling at that like it was a joke, but he didn't say it like a joke. He said it like a promise. Delmare passed 2 winters ago. His kids didn't farm, didn't want the headache, didn't want the taxes, didn't want the slow life. They sold. And that's when Harbor Crest Development showed up like a traveling circus with money. One day the pasture was just pasture, and the next there were glossy brochures and a temporary sign by the highway that read Stonehaven Preserve Luxury Living in the Hills. Under that, in smaller print, like it was trying not to be rude about it, executive homes starting in the 800s. They rolled in with survey stakes drones buzzing like angry bees and a project manager named Brandon Kessler who drove a black Range Rover so clean it looked like it got waxed twice a day. The kind of guy whose shoes never touch mud unless it's for a photo. The first time I met Brandon, he was standing near the entrance to my gravel road with a civil engineer, both of them staring at a tablet like it held the secrets of the universe. I pulled up in my F-150, rolled down the window, and I tried to keep it casual. "You planning on paving my driveway?" I asked. He laughed like I'd said something charming and harmless. "We're just reviewing the layout. Beautiful property you've got back there." I nodded once. I use that road every day. It's my only access. He did that smooth little head tilt like he'd practiced being reasonable in a mirror. Of course. We're aware there's an easement, and I remember thinking, good, great, conversation over. But I still said it out loud anyway because I'm not new to people who treat land like a chessboard. It isn't just some handshake agreement. It's recorded, permanent, filed with the county since '64. He smiled like he was putting a lid on a pot that might boil over. "We'll make sure everything's handled appropriately." Handled appropriately. That phrase stuck in my head like a splinter. Because it sounds polite, right? But it also sounds like something you say when you plan to handle it your way and you're hoping I'll get tired before you do. Still, I didn't lose sleep over it. Developers come and go. Paperwork is paperwork. My easement was ironclad. I had copies in my filing cabinet and scans on my computer. Worst case, I figured we'd have a few awkward conversations and maybe some construction noise. Then 2 months later, I left town for 5 days to visit my sister in Missouri. She'd just had knee replacement surgery and needed help with the basic stuff, standing up, getting food, moving around without looking like she was about to faint. I locked up my house, set the porch light on a timer, and didn't think twice. I mean, why would I? The drive home was 12 hours of highway podcasts and that gas station coffee that tastes like regret. I remember feeling that good kind of tired when I finally crossed back into Tennessee, the kind where you're not miserable, you're just ready. Ready for your own bed, your own quiet, your own place. I turned off Route 18 at sunset and stopped dead where my gravel road should have been. There was a massive dirt berm, 8, maybe 9 feet tall, 50 feet across, packed so tight it looked like it had been pressed into place by God's own thumb. On top of it ran a construction fence with bright orange mesh and metal posts, and there were signs every 20 feet. Private property, no trespassing. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd taken the wrong turn. I even looked around like maybe the highway had shifted while I was gone too. But no, this was it. This was where my road had always been. The mailbox cluster was gone. The old wooden post with my address number had been ripped out like a rotten tooth. The mouth of the road had been carved up and graded flat, then redirected into a freshly paved street, curving left toward what I assumed was their new entrance. They hadn't just blocked my road. They had erased it. I got out of my truck and walked closer like my eyes might be lying to me. The gravel was gone, scraped away. I could see the scars where the old path had been torn up and rolled into part of their main boulevard. Streetlights were already installed, concrete curbs, and there it was like a smug grin, a decorative stone sign that said, Stone Haven Preserve. I stood there with the sunset behind me, my truck idling, and I felt this weird mix of disbelief and something colder, because it wasn't an accident. You don't accidentally remove half a mile of road. You don't oops a berm into existence. This was a decision. A security guard in a neon vest jogged over from a temporary trailer. He had that rehearsed tone, polite but firm, like he'd been trained to talk to people who might get loud. Sir, this is a restricted construction zone. I pointed at the dirt wall. My house is back there. He blinked like the sentence didn't compute. There's no residential access beyond this point. I stared at him. I live beyond this point. He shifted his weight and glanced toward the trailer like he was hoping someone else would come handle me. You'll need to contact the site office. Right there, standing in front of what used to be my road, I called Brandon. He picked up on the third ring. Hey, Matt, what's up? And listen, I'm not a yeller. I'm not the guy who screams into a phone. But my voice came out sharp anyway because my brain couldn't find a softer option. What's up? My driveway is gone. There was a pause. Not surprised, just a pause. Like he'd been expecting this call eventually, and he was choosing his words. Oh yeah, he said, like we were talking about a package delivery. We realigned that corridor. The original path cut directly through our primary boulevard. It didn't make sense from a design standpoint. You realigned my access. We created a new access point on the east boundary. It's actually an improvement, better grading, smoother entry. I didn't ask for a new access point. He exhaled, just slightly annoyed, like I was slowing down his day. Matt, this benefits everyone. The old gravel track was outdated. This way you've got a more modern connection. That's when something in me went quiet. Not angry quiet, cold quiet. You blocked the only legal access to my property. We didn't block it, he said, and I swear he sounded proud of the wording. We relocated it. I looked at that dirt berm and that fence and those signs, and I thought, yeah, this man can say any word he wants. Words don't move dirt, machines do. I'll call you back, I said, and I hung up before I said something that would make me look like the crazy one. I stood there another minute listening to distant construction equipment, watching the sun drop behind a row of trees that used to frame my road, and I realized something simple and ugly. They didn't think I mattered. I was an inconvenience in the middle of a master plan. A lone house at the end of a line item. And while I was out of town helping my sister shuffle to the bathroom, they decided my rights were flexible. I drove to a motel 15 minutes away and got a room for the night. And I didn't sleep much. Motel mattresses have a way of reminding you you're not where you belong. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was that berm sitting there like a middle finger made of dirt. Around midnight, I pulled out my laptop and dug through my files. After my dad passed, I'd scanned everything: deed surveys, easements, because I realized I was the last one responsible for keeping the history straight. And there it was, dated June 3rd, 1964. Typed, signed, notarized. It described a 60-foot right-of-way running from Route 18 straight back to what is now my front gate. It said perpetual. It said appurtenant. It said runs with the land. There was nothing vague about it. Nothing flexible. Nothing handled appropriately. At 6:30 the next morning, I called my attorney, Laura Bennett. I've known Laura since high school. She's not flashy. Drives a Subaru with dog hair in the back seat. Keeps her hair in a messy bun most days. But when it comes to property law in this county, she's the person other lawyers quietly call when they're in trouble. She answered on the second ring. Matt, you don't usually call me at sunrise. Who died? They moved my road. Silence. What do you mean moved? I mean, it's gone. Bulldozed. There's a dirt wall where the entrance used to be. She didn't say anything for a beat, and I could hear her brain shifting gears. Then she got very calm. Send me pictures. Send me the easement. I drove back to the site before the crews fully ramped up. I took photos of everything: the berm from multiple angles, the destroyed gravel bed, the new paved boulevard laid right over my original path. I walked along the fence line until I found where they'd carved their improved access off the east side. It was narrow and winding like an afterthought snaking through low ground that floods every spring. Anybody local would look at that route and think, yeah, that's a mud pit waiting to happen. I sent Laura everything. She called back 20 minutes later and her voice had changed. Tight. Focused. They can't do this. That's what I thought. No, she said sharper now. They really cannot do this. An easement isn't a suggestion. It's a property right. They would need a formal legal process to extinguish it or relocate it. Court approval, compensation, something. They didn't ask. I stared out the motel window at nothing and felt my jaw clench. They didn't ask because they assumed I'd roll over. Exactly, she said. Stay put. I'm filing an emergency motion for injunctive relief. I didn't know what that meant in real-life terms, but it sounded like the legal version of slamming your hand down on the table. By noon, she had drafted the paperwork. By 2 o'clock, it was filed. By late afternoon, the court scheduled a hearing for the next morning. Things move fast when someone messes with recorded property rights, especially when the fix isn't complicated. You either restore access or you don't. That night, I got another motel room. I watched from a distance as dump trucks continued hauling dirt and crews kept framing houses deeper inside Stonehaven Preserve like nothing was wrong. Like I wasn't sitting there essentially locked out of my own property. The next morning, I put on the only suit I own. It still smelled faintly like the last wedding I attended, which felt appropriate because I was about to watch a relationship die. Our county courthouse isn't big. 2 courtrooms, creaky floors, portraits of retired judges staring down like they're still deciding cases from beyond the grave. Laura met me on the steps with a legal pad tucked under her arm and that calm look she gets before a fight. They'll argue they provided alternative access, she said quietly. They'll claim it's equivalent or better. It floods, I said. She nodded once. That helps us. We walked into the courtroom and there he was, Brandon Kessler. Crisp navy suit, polished shoes, not a hair out of place. His attorney beside him, tall guy from Nashville I'd never seen before, the kind with a voice built for saying Your Honor like it's a weapon. Brandon gave me a nod like we were at a networking event. The judge, an older man named Harold Whitman, took the bench and got right to it. Laura laid out the timeline, the easement language, the photos. She described the berm, the destruction, the unilateral relocation. Her voice stayed level, but there was steel under it like she was holding a door closed against a storm. Then Brandon's attorney stood up and started talking about good faith and development necessity and mutual benefit, how the prior gravel path was substandard and interfered with the planned main thoroughfare, how they built a new access route to improve safety and usability for me. I almost laughed. Improved safety. By sending me through a flood zone, Judge Whitman leaned forward. Counselor, was the original easement extinguished through a legal proceeding? The attorney hesitated just a flicker. No, Your Honor. Was there written consent from the easement holder? No. The judge looked down at the papers, then back up. Then on what authority did your client destroy the existing right-of-way? And there it was, the moment where fancy words stop working, because the truth is sitting in black ink right in front of you. They tried to dress it up. Phrases like practical necessity and modern infrastructure and equivalent access. But none of it changed the simple fact that they had taken a recorded property right and bulldozed it. The judge's ruling was immediate. He granted the injunction. Ordered Harborcrest to restore the original easement to its prior condition within 72 hours, remove the obstruction, reinstate access. He also ordered them to cover my legal fees and warned that failure to comply would result in contempt proceedings. You could feel the air shift in the room, like someone had opened a window and all the smugness got sucked out. Brandon's jaw tightened, not outrage, not apology, irritation, like his schedule had been inconvenienced. Outside the courtroom, he finally spoke directly to me. This didn't have to escalate. You buried my road, I said. We offered you a better solution. You offered me something I didn't agree to. He shook his head slightly like I was being stubborn over a minor inconvenience. Development requires flexibility. Not from me, I said. And I watched his eyes do this tiny recalculation like he was trying to figure out what kind of person I was and why I wasn't playing the role he'd written for me. Here's the twist nobody saw coming, not even me. When Laura filed that emergency motion, she didn't just send it to the court. She also sent copies to the county planning department. Because destroying a recorded easement without authorization isn't just a civil issue between neighbors. It raises questions about permits, approved site plans, compliance. The whole machine. And once the judge issued his order, it triggered something bigger. 2 days after the hearing, county inspectors showed up at Stonehaven Preserve, and they didn't come quietly. By the time the county trucks rolled in, word had already started spreading. Small towns don't need the internet to gossip. We have the hardware store, the diner, and the Sunday morning church parking lot. By Friday, folks were asking me, "You the one fighting that big development," like I'd signed up for a boxing match. I didn't feel like a fighter. I felt like a guy who just wanted to get home without climbing a dirt mountain. The 72-hour deadline ticked down fast. On the second morning, I drove out again and parked where my road used to begin. The berm was still there, but something had changed. Bright red county vehicles lined up near the sales trailer. Inspectors in hard hats walked the property with clipboards and laser levels. I watched from a distance as one of them pointed toward the main boulevard, the one built directly over my original easement. That boulevard wasn't decoration, it was central. It connected every lot in Phase 1. Pulling it apart wasn't like moving a mailbox, it was surgery. By that afternoon, heavy equipment was back at the berm. Only this time they were tearing it down. The first scoop of dirt peeled away like a scar reopening. Gravel trucks arrived. Crews worked late under portable floodlights, reconstructing the roadbed, relaying gravel, regrading it to match the original survey. Laura had made sure the judge's order was specific: restore it to prior condition. No creative interpretations, no close enough, straight back 60 feet, the way it had always been. I stood there leaning against my truck as the sun went down, watching the shape of my road slowly reappear. And I'm not going to lie, it hit me in the chest. That stretch of gravel isn't glamorous, but it's mine. My dad drove cattle trailers down it. I taught my niece how to ride a bike on it one summer, her little tires wobbling in the dust while my dad laughed like he had all the time in the world. Seeing that road come back felt like watching someone stitch a piece of my family history back into place. Brandon pulled up beside me around dusk. No suit this time. Polo shirt. Frustration dripping off him like sweat. "You're costing us millions," he said quietly. I didn't even look at him. "You should have read the deed. We had approval for the subdivision layout. Did you have approval to erase my access?" He didn't answer. He just watched the crew scramble to undo what they'd done, and his face did that tight thing people do when they're trying not to admit they're cornered. "You could have worked with us," he said after a moment. "We could have compensated you." "There's a difference between negotiation and demolition," I said, and that's when he finally looked at me like he understood I wasn't bluffing, I wasn't playing tough, I was just done. He muttered something about investors not liking uncertainty, like that was my job to worry about. "That's not my responsibility," I told him. And here's the part: most people don't see the part that made this whole situation collapse like a cheap folding chair. When the county inspectors started reviewing their permits, they didn't just look at my easement. They looked at everything: stormwater drainage, setback requirements, grading limits, retention ponds, the boring stuff that becomes very exciting when someone's been rushing. Turns out when you're in a hurry to build an $800,000 dream, you sometimes shave corners. The inspectors found they'd graded beyond approved boundaries in 2 sections. They'd installed a retention pond closer to a property line than regulations allowed. Nothing catastrophic on its own maybe, but combined with the easement violation, it painted a picture. A pattern. Within a week, bright red stop work orders were posted on every lot in Phase 1. 15 home sites. Framing halted. Concrete trucks canceled. Realtors standing around smiling too hard while they explained to potential buyers why construction was temporarily paused. Temporarily turned into indefinitely. I heard the investors were a group out of Atlanta, and they didn't love headlines about legal disputes and county investigations. Funding tightened. Contractors drifted to other projects. Momentum evaporated. All because someone decided my road was expendable. 3 days after the berm came down, I drove my truck down the restored gravel for the first time. It wasn't perfect yet, fresh and loose in spots, but it was there, straight as it had always been, familiar, like a hand on your shoulder. Halfway down, I stopped and cut the engine. It was quiet again. No bulldozers, no generators, just wind moving through the trees. I sat there thinking about something Brandon had said. Development requires flexibility. Maybe it does. But flexibility isn't the same as surrender. And progress doesn't mean erasing the people who were there first just because they don't have a marketing budget. A month later, I heard Stonehaven Preserve was restructuring. That's the polite term. The big stone sign stayed up for a while like a monument to ambition. Then even that came down. Last I heard, Brandon moved on to another project in another county, probably telling a different version of this story where I'm the stubborn landowner who tanked a visionary community. But here's the thing. I never asked for a fight. I asked for a road. The one promised in ink and recorded in the courthouse long before glossy brochures and drone footage and luxury taglines. And yeah, part of me felt vindicated watching those stop work orders go up. I won't pretend otherwise. There's a certain satisfaction in seeing consequences land where they're due. But under that satisfaction was something heavier, something that still sits with me when I drive that half-mile every day, dusty in summer, muddy in spring. It shouldn't take a courtroom to make someone respect your boundary. It shouldn't take a judge to remind people that recorded means something. What gets me is how easy it was for them to assume I'd accept whatever they decided was better. That because I live alone at the end of a gravel road, I wouldn't push back. That convenience for the many automatically outweighs the rights of the few. Maybe sometimes it does, but not like that. Not without consent, not without process, not with a bulldozer and a smile. Sometimes I think about paving that road just to remove the irony, but then I remember why I kept it gravel in the first place. It makes people slow down. It makes you feel where you are. It reminds you that land isn't just a product, it's a life. So let me ask you something, because I'm genuinely curious and I've heard people split right down the middle on this. If you were in my position, would you have handled it differently? If a developer offered you a better access point without asking, first, would you see it as progress or overreach? At what point does growth become entitlement? Drop your thoughts. Tell me if you think I was justified or just stubborn, and if you've ever had a neighbor, an HOA, or a developer push past your boundaries. I'd honestly like to hear how it turned out. Because out here at the end of this gravel road, I learned something simple. If you don't defend your access, somebody else might decide to reroute your whole life.